Good evening. I'm Socrates, Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening, and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. Mississippi, a state with less than 3 million people, of which 45 to 50% of those people are people of color. We're living in different times. Everything in the universe seems to be changing. We don't know exactly where we are. We are the lost people of today. We're going to talk about these things, and we're going to talk about how we got here, and we're going to talk about the influences and those events in our history that changed the course of the way that African Americans think. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family, and if you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to hit the subscribe button. We're in the middle of a subscription campaign, and we're growing every day, but we need your help. Go on and tag this program, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe. Now, if you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform, you'll see that we're a little bit different. We have categories there that offer our viewers and our listeners many options. They can choose to watch shows under inspiration and hear some of the best preaching in the world. Bishop Ronnie Crudup at New Horizon Church is featured there every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock and again at 11 o'clock. You know, if you scroll down through all of the topics, but you don't feel like you want to watch anything, but you want to have some easy listening, then just click on We Believe Radio. We Believe Radio, our own internet streaming platform, playing some of the best music in the world. 24 hours a day, nonstop. Here at We Believe, we are trying to make a difference. We are trying to be the little light on the hill. We're trying to demonstrate and show that it does not matter what the odds are against you, how seemingly they are so insurmountable, but with good help, dedicated friends and family and staff, you can make it. Now, it's going to be difficult if you're in Mississippi. If you're African American trying to start a business in Mississippi, you have a more difficult slate in front of you because you happen to be in the poorest state in the nation, where infant mortality rates are off the chain. We're the most obese state in the country, and so we got a lot of things going against us. But the number one thing we got going against us is poverty. We're economically deprived, and we find ourselves in this position with no solutions, and we don't know exactly who we are and how we got here. Now, we've been seen in over 139 countries all across the world. So our friends in Japan and Egypt, welcome to this evening's show. My friends over in Africa, I know it's a little early in the morning over there, but it's time for you to get up and enjoy your coffee around 6 a.m. over there in Sudan. And so we are trying to unite African Americans throughout this entire country. Now, as always, my co host, the distinguished gentleman, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, is here with us this evening. And as I always say, you know, my co host is a man that was born in the Mississippi Delta on a plantation. Think about that. And he sits here this evening as Dr. Eldridge Henderson, coming from the plantation. And I tell my friends that Booker T. Washington said, it's not the heights that you obtain, but it's the depths from which you came. Meaning if you started on top, you ought to be way on top by now. But if you started at the bottom of the pit and you only climb halfway out, you may be overachieving those that are recognized as being on top. Because it's all about where you start, where you came from, and how you're going to get where you're trying to go. But I tell you, Dr. Henderson is a dangerous man because he's street smart and he's book smart. And when you got that combination, people have a right to be concerned about what you're going to say and how you're going to act. Dr. Henderson, as always, it's good to see you, sir. How have you been?
Well, I've been fine, sir, and I'm very glad to be here. And there's one thing I want to tell you, Mr. Socrates. You don't know how important it is to be in the poorest state in the Union. That's a great advantage, sir. That's a great advantage.
Speak to me.
And the reason why.
Yeah.
When you're at the bottom of the barrel, all you have to do is be able to look up and figure out a way to get to the top. That's why I like being in Mississippi, because I know one day things are going to change. Things will happen where you're on the bottom in 2013. 10 years from now, Mississippi can and will be one of the #1 states in America if we continue to work and seek positive outcomes and eliminate the negatives that we have in this nation, especially in this state.
Doc, I'm glad to hear you say that because someone has to say that things are going to get better. Someone has to say that things can be a lot better. Because I'm seeing more gloom and doom. I'm seeing a lost generation. I see my African American brothers and sisters that are confused. They're not mentally ill, but they are confused. They have no direction as to where they're going. So how are we going to get better if we are lost people?
Well, there have always been in history lost people that always rose to the top. There's not one major nation in the world that at one time was not at the bottom, even though now they have been reverted back to the bottom. But Spain, the nations in Africa, the nations in Europe, in Eastern Europe, many of those countries in Latin America, Mexico, for instance, were powerful. All of the old communist countries that had dictators in the past, many of those are rich now with oil and gold and silver and diamonds. And they're about to make a resurgence. And in 10 to 15 years, they're going to regain their power base. They're going to get more respect internationally. And those guys in these states like Mississippi will be power brokers and power makers and policy initiators in the next 10 to 15 years, I guarantee.
Doc, I'm going to hold you to that 10 years from today. I want to come back there. I'm going to make put a pin right there, and 10 years from today, we're going to come back and see how we're doing, because I just have to continue to remind you, because my experience this week was so disheartening. I went at McDonald's yesterday, and the gentleman behind the counter had this stone around his neck. And the guy that was with me had a similar looking stone, and they spoke to one another, and I said, well, what's that all about? And he says, you know, we're getting closer to the universe. And I said, well, I don't know anything about that. And he says, well, that's because you sleep. You're not woke. And I thought about that. Now, here is a guy that is behind the counter at McDonald's, making about $8, $9 an hour, got a stone around his neck, but he thinks I'm asleep. And I couldn't imagine how he came to that conclusion that he's getting closer to the universe. And what does that mean? This is indoctrination that we have been under so long by those that would keep us in captivity has permeated our brains. And I don't know what black people believe anymore. I don't know who we think we are anymore. But you say things are going to get better.
Well, they are if we make it better as individuals and as a collective unit. There is nothing black people can't do if they organize and stop looking and expecting the so-called integration process to do something for them. There's an unlimited opportunity for black people worldwide in areas where they're in a majority to rule those areas in many areas of activity from birth to death. If you're in an area where you're in a majority, all you have to do is pool your resources, negotiate with your friends and enemies, and focus on business development and education and training first. And then your economics, your religion, your leadership potential, and your politics will rise in order. And that's when you can be respected again as a rising people. You have love from your enemies, even though that love will be trying to take what you have, people trying to get next to you. But you have to be smart enough not to surrender that respect that you have gained.
Now, Doc, and I wish that everybody could hear you. I wish that the world and our leaders could hear you, because that's not been our history. I mean, you mentioned about the diamonds and the gold and the minerals. And as far as my history tells me, all of that was located in the continent of Africa.
And still is, sir. Mr. Socrates, still is.
It still is, Doc, but you told me that we were invaded by the Portuguese and by the Chinese and by Europeans, Europe. And we lost control of all of our resources.
That's because we had non-focused leaders in that time. And the enemy always knows, who to attack. And you find the weakest person and you give him power through money, through position. And then you bribe him through those power bases, money, position, and the importance that you tell him that he is associated with, and he will kill his mother, his brother, his sister, his children even, to become powerful. And those are the kind of people that are changing the world in a negative manner. And we allow it to happen.
So you start out with this premise that we put our weakest members in charge.
Oh yes, that's not we. The enemy does that. I call them the human enemies of mankind, and then tell us that you have the best person because I support those people. And we fall for that. Instead of doing what I've been teaching for some time, you create your own leaders, you train your own leaders, and then you put them in positions of responsibility prior to getting in the top senior leadership position. Let them serve as volunteers. Let them serve on commissions and agencies and boards of control, and then put them in power where they can make that final decision.
Why and how do we allow anybody to put weak leaders out of our community in leadership positions? And I hear what you're saying, because I'm thinking about some of the current elected officials that we have in Hinds County and in Jackson, Mississippi. And it just appears that your statement that we take our weakest people and put them, well, we don't, but somebody puts our weakest people in position, seems to be ringing true more than ever before.
It is. But the bad part about it, there's only a small percentage of people that's doing that. You have heard me say many times that out of the 100% of black people in Hinds County that are registered vote, 100%, usually 29 to 17% vote in any election. So that means 75 to 80% are not voting. I mean those that are registered. I'm not even talking about those that are not registered. So only just a handful of people are helping Mississippi in the black community make decisions, make policy, select the best person for the job, which they don't do because they usually select their friends or the person that has been recommended to them by the people that give them financial support. And that, my friend, is our problem.
Now, Doc, let me try to gain control over this phone because it now runs my life. It tells me where to go, when to go, and people interrupt me at any time. They just come into my life whenever they get ready, uninvited. But the phone rings and it interrupts the conversation that we're having, so I apologize for that. But now, Doc, let's take a look at this thing because it's critically important because you are teaching and you're one of the most sought after speakers in this entire country. And people are calling up on you to add some light and some education and some wisdom in our communities about where we are and where we gotta go. So I want to make absolutely certain that we give you ample opportunity to tell us what your 5-point strategy is that could change our folks' lives, as you say, in 60 to 90 days. Could you hammer that again and again for our folk?
Well, I can. It is a fact, sir, that if you are in the majority population anywhere in the world, in order to gain respect from your opponents, and even those that you work with that are your friends, if you control 5 areas of activity in your area where you're in the majority, from birth to death, there's no way you won't be the supreme person or the supreme group. Those 5 areas are education and training, religion, leadership, economic development, and politics. You have to pool your resources, decide who's going to be the leaders through your recruitment, through your recommendations from others, and train them to be in one of those 5 areas of activity, to be leaders there. I told you, they start off as volunteers. Then you insert them into positions of responsibility where they don't have to make major decisions. You put them on boards and agencies and commissions. And once they find out all the interworkings, then you have your own people to challenge the incumbents that's in office and allow them to win after you register people to vote and get with those that are registered to vote that are not voting, create your own people, and then on the day of voting, the same 25% or the 17 or 18% going to vote for the incumbent. But you have created a new army of voters. You have contacted them once you register them, once a week, through social media and other means. You've had meetings at least once every 2 or 3 months. And those people then will put new people in office and they can leave running.
Doug, we're going to go to a commercial break and we're going to come back. And in our next segment, we're going to talk about the indoctrination that's influencing our people. I mentioned to you the young black man with stones around their neck and told me that they got to get closer to the universe and that I need to wake up. We want to talk about who is really influencing our folk and why and what is going to be the outcome of that. And we're going to start with religion. And we want to understand its role because my understanding is when African Americans came over here, they were of a different religion. They were not Christians. I'm not sure exactly what they were. And so you get an individual that has no identity anymore, and he grows up not knowing anything about himself, and then he starts to act in a certain way. So when we come back, after this break, I want you to tell us about these influencers in life. And what is the number one factor that we need to be concerned about that has control over what our children see and hear and how they act? We're going to go to a station break, and we'll be right back after this message. Stay tuned.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back. You're watching Socrates, Garrett Live, and we're broadcasting from Jackson, Mississippi in the We Believe Digital Studios, the We Believe Media Network that consists of podcast shows, broadcast shows, internet radio, production, media production, filming, recording, all of the things that you might want to be involved in media is housed right here at We Believe. So if you need commercials cut, if you need jingles cut, if you need sweepers cut, if you need documentaries done, this is the place that you come. We Believe Media. Remember the name. Remember the name. It's going to be the name that's going to stay in the black community, much like BET had its humble beginning and rose to a point that it ultimately was taken over by those that didn't want us to control our communication. I hope that doesn't happen to We Believe. But you know how that is. The enemy of mankind is too much money. Now, as always, I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Henderson, and we're talking about some things in our community. And Doc, I want to get right back into it. The greatest influence in the African-American community today, how do you see that?
Well, I see that as one of the greatest and most important things that's going on in America in the minds of what I call the human enemies of mankind. If you want to stay in control of anything, of any group, all you have to do is diverse that group with different ideas. And then once you break them up into different units, you fund those different ideas with money, power, and position, and teach people that there is another way. And they are not going to be looking at what's best for themselves. Good example, the Black Matters movement. Another one is LGBT movement. The other one where I think it's something like don't say or don't tell or something, the military deal that came along, Don Clinton and others, where you diverse the ideas in the community, have people to advocate for these things, and those very leaders that are talking about supremacy, looking out for self and my people, so to speak, would get confused. And the resources that are allocated against them will be given to those people that are going to fight for that new order. And that's what is happening to that man you mentioned at McDonald's or wherever, that he believes in his, and I use this word often, in his subconscious, that some spirit is going to move into his inner being and in the black people, and all of a sudden, a light is going to switch or flash, and everything will be all right. That is not going to happen. If you look at the history of the world, people fail for two reasons. One is they allow others to influence them, or number two, they allow themselves to be inactive in their own regard.
Now, Doc, that influence is so powerful that the man with the stone, it's so powerful until he believes that there's something in the universe that's going to change his condition. Now, Doc, you and I grew up at a time when we heard the songs, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Coming for to Carry Me Home." We believed that there was going to be a better day for us somewhere after life, after this life, that things were going to be better, and so that you could submit to everything that was going on right here today, because that influence had total control over you.
That is correct. Now, the bad news is, and I hate to admit it, but I was born hearing and singing that song. I believed that propaganda during the time from when I was 4 or 5 years of age until I turned 17. I would be working on the plantation, and my parents and others would be singing that song. We would hear it on Sunday at church. And the only place I wanted to go when I was young was to heaven. I wanted to be on that swing. I wanted to get to heaven when I died. But I didn't know what was going to be happening between that time. After I started exploring other ideas, other religions, I decided that heaven is and ought to be on earth. And you're supposed to live in heaven on earth before you die. Get yourself together educationally, politically, religiously, and economically. And you can live in heaven on earth and then die and go to heaven, and not the reverse. I've been telling people for years, you cannot live in hell on earth and die and go to heaven. It's just not possible. The Lord is against that concept, because he said there is a season of change, that everything must change. And there is something that's going on in the world where you have to expect change. And if you don't expect change and do nothing about it, you're going to be mentally confused, and you're going to start looking at voodoo and all kinds of strange mystic ideas that are going to, what I call, penetrate your mind and having you believe that that inner spirit from outer space going to pop up one day and everything going to jump well. And here you are when that happens. Somebody's going to come along and say, we only have a few days left, and on a certain day, I want you all together at a certain place, and the Lord is coming. And that's when you end up in trouble and kill yourself, and you dying then and going straight to hell, because your mind has been so confused while you're talking that propaganda. You're living in hell then. You're not making any money. You're not getting any training to promote your economic activity in a positive manner. You have lost your relations with a lot of relatives because you talk that propaganda to them, and they think you're crazy. Just on and on.
So, Doc, you speak of things that could happen, but in fact has happened. And I recall the little Jonestown event where everybody went off to the island, and the old boy down there said he was Jesus, and he then declared that everybody should drink the Kool-Aid.
That's right.
And thousands of black people drank the Kool-Aid and died.
And most of them were black people. Most of them were black, believe it or not. That's right.
Following somebody down to Jonestown and drinking the Kool-Aid and just dying because they had been indoctrinated to believe that, that's a dangerous thing. Now, Doc, I want to give props to the indoctrination to the extent that I think it has maintained a degree of civility in our society, meaning that I believe that man who does not believe in the hereinafter, the heaven and earth, I believe that that man is subject to doing anything. I don't believe he got no controls on him. I believe that he can just invade. I'm not saying Mr. Putin believes that doesn't have a religious foundation, but I am saying that he just decided one day that he was going to invade Ukraine. And it don't make no difference about how many people he killed, how many people has to die because he made that decision, because he had no moral compass that said that he couldn't do that. So religion has kept us from acting out as old people. You won't hardly kill nobody, not because you don't want to, but because you don't want to go to hell for having done it.
No, I don't want to go to jail, not hell. I'm already living in hell on earth right now. The reason I hadn't killed anybody recently is because I don't want to go to hell the second or third time. And I don't want to go to prison.
Well, I get you. I get you. Jail is a deterrent. You don't want to lose your freedom. I get that. But, Doc, it kept you and I from doing heinous stuff. And we didn't chop up nobody, and we don't do mass murders and shoot up everybody. People our age don't tend to do that. But there's a new group out here, Doc, that they just get out of their car, walk into Walmart, and open fire. They don't go to church, Doc. They're not indoctrinated in any way. Our young people are not in those institutions the way that you and I were.
That's true. It's because those young people, sir, have been trained to be that way. Their mothers, fathers, grandmothers, school system, politicians, and others train those young people, black and white, to believe that they shouldn't be responsible. They've been trained to believe that others are the cause of your situation. That's why you don't have a good education. That's why you don't have a good job. That's why you don't have all the political positions in your community. That's why you have no money and others seem to be getting rich. Therefore, I got to do something about that. So you're going to go and kill a lot of people, blow up somebody, go to a church and sit there and read the Bible 2 or 3 minutes and then shoot everyone in the room, that kind of thing.
That's a sick person. They're certainly out of control.
That's right. But now, to them, they're not out of control because they learned it somewhere. They learned it in the schools. They looked at the school books and found that there were certain people, always the predominant people. They listened to their old grandfather and their mothers and aunts talk about supremacy and what we used to have. And those folks you see now that's getting ahead are the people we used to control and own. And something needs to be happening to those folks. And those young people there looking at the dad, can't pay his bills, working day and night. Mother can't do anything but have 3 or 4 or 5 children. She's working at Walmart herself. Sons and daughters out there on drugs, getting pregnant and all kind of things. And that young man or that young girl just don't see a bright future.
Now, Doc, you brought a point in that I hadn't thought about. It must be extremely difficult and hard on an individual to watch a black man rise to a position of power and prominence when you look at him as somebody that you used to own.
That's right.
That was wasn't even a human being according to your teaching of the Constitution.
And the way it's way after the Constitution is according to your teaching you heard sitting at your dinner table from your grandfather. He would say, see that little boy there, I know his mama. He's the mayor of town X. She used to work for us. She used to cook for you, boy. She was your mother. You used to be breastfed by that woman. Now her son went to Harvard University, and now he's the mayor, or he's a senator. That ain't right.
That ain't right.
That's not right. They say that ain't right. We can't allow that.
Proud Boys was talking that language every day.
Say, son, he has your job. Daughter, she has your job. Now this woman thinks she can be mayor of our little town.
And so when they say they want their country back, they're talking about they want you back in your rightful, not your rightful position, but back in the place that they had you.
That's right, that you allowed them to have you in. Because you never did rebel. You always lowered your eyes. You decided that you were not going to defend yourself individually and collectively.
My religion told me not to.
That's right, and you've been brainwashed if you believe that, if you believe those kind of religions. You only were taught selected parts of the Bible. You didn't look at the other parts that told you directly and indirectly things are going to change. There are seasons. And the other one is that there is a time for everything, and that means there's a time for you to be the supreme.
Well, I don't know if there's a season for that, Doc.
Season for what?
For me to be the supreme power. I don't think there's a rotation of that.
Yes, it is.
I think that the strong always win. They dominate. And I think that my European brothers that don't have no moral compass demonstrate strength beyond anything that black folk can imagine. He doesn't have anything that keeps him from doing anything. That's why when he says, I want to go to Mars, he wants to go to Mars. What the hell, why? Because I want to go. And there's nothing that's going to stop me from going. You don't hear no black folk talking about they want to go to Mars.
They're already on Mars. They need to stay right here where they are, since this is their country. They've been here for 400 years.
Whose country is it?
It's the black people country. The country that has always lived on this labor of others, the people that worked and made the money that they didn't get, that made other people prosperous. That's your country. All you got to do is figure out how you're going to change things.
I can't change things in my mind because there's not enough of me to think the same way. I can't. There is no unity in our community. I get it. You tell me that slavery could have been abolished in 60 days.
Of course.
I heard you say that.
Of course.
I never really understood why you would make a statement like that.
Because it's true.
And that's because there were more slaves than there was.
Then there are slave owners, and many plantations had 50 and 60 slaves and 4 and 5 slave owners or slave supervisors. And of course, when they got to that point where they had 3 white supervisors or less, they would usually upgrade one of the slaves and give him an opportunity to be the foreman of the slaves and put the black woman in the house as the new mother and the chief housekeeper. And they promoted the things that the Europeans that owned the slaves were doing because they told them and showed them how to do it. And that's when you got the most violence of all in the history of slavery. When the situation got bad and the white folks said, the Europeans basically, we are scared to death. These black folks here in Virginia and other places are rebelling. We look at how those people did down in Haiti. They done took over the country. And now we got to figure out a way to change things. So they got them Alcatons that they trained and put them in positions, gave them their old suits. I told you this the other week. Gave them their old clothing, gave them an old horse, and they would ride around thinking they are superior to the other slaves, and they were eating the same pig feet and sucking up on the same chicken tail.
Doc, we gotta go to a commercial break. These conversations and this teaching and lecturing will not be found in the Mississippi history books and will not be taught in class. And the critical race theory in our schools and institutions. The governor and the government says it will not be taught. You will not learn anything about your history in Mississippi, nor will you learn anything about the kind of cruel things that were done to you and your ancestors. You won't learn it here. But Doc says that your history can be found in different places. You know, I was amazed at the fact that he told me a couple of programs back that Abraham Lincoln's wife had some kind of problem, some kind of mental issue. And I said, how in the world would a man know anything about the condition of Abraham Lincoln's wife? It's just, I know he didn't read that in his school books. And so he said he found it in old periodicals and old papers and things of that nature. So you can learn it here at We Believe if you want to know something about your history, where you came from, and then we're going to talk about where we're going when we come back for this very last segment. So we're going to station ID. We want you to stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Welcome back to Socrates, Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi in the We Believe broadcast studio. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family and send us stars. If you're watching us on YouTube, go on and hit the subscribe button. We really want you to subscribe. We want you to become a part of our family. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, then share this program and hit the donate button. It takes finance to make this engine run, and so we need your help in doing that. And we are bringing you the kind of information that you won't get anywhere else. You won't hear it on any other radio station, any other broadcast station across the country. The closest thing that you're going to get to us is probably somewhere with Roland Martin and some of the things that he does out there, because he kind of speaks truth to power. But he doesn't deal with the history and the psychological condition of our people as much as we do. And so if you want to learn something, know something, and then find a method to change your condition, this is the place that you ought to come. We need you to have your own podcast shows here. We need to do your recordings here. You need to have your commercials filmed here. And you need to listen to us on We Believe Radio 24 hours a day. We got it going on right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the poorest state in the nation. The most prominent leaders in our country have come out of ground zero, which is Mississippi. We produce more leaders than any other state, and that's because of the despair, because necessity is the mother of invention. When you've been treated cruel, you get up and you fight harder than those that have been born with less challenges in their life. No black man is born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but some have been born with less challenges in their life, and they tend to produce less in those conditions because they're satisfied and complacent. Now, Dr. Henderson, we say that there's got to be a solution.
Always a solution.
And you talked about your plan. It's a good plan. And you say that integration was bad for Black America.
I told you many times, and I've been telling people this for a long time. There are two things that ruined black folks, and they haven't gotten over it today. One is slavery and the way they were taught and the things they were taught, and integration, and what they were taught about integration and not taught about integration. And when the white people or the European Americans and Europeans throughout the world tried to compromise the so-called civil rights leaders through promising legislation, through promising financial support, that made a lot of the integrationists continue to talk about the fact that black people ought to want to yield or surrender their power, their economic power, their education power, their social power, and go in the other direction. And that's why it's so important to understand the three letters that you mentioned. Critical race theory, CRT. That is the key to the black man's knowledge right there. If the black people in America and the world would learn what critical race theory is all about and look at the systemic institutional, and historical racist acts that were passed in every aspect of American history as far as blacks were concerned, education, training, politics, all of it. They will find that the black man is in a position where he ought to be confused. And if you find out what people have done to you as an individual, to you as a family person, to you as a person that believed in religion, that didn't have any economic wherewithal because it was designed for you not to have it. And even when you got hold to land, animals, education, you couldn't use it. Your little education that you achieved, you could not use that other than where they were telling you could use it. If you bought a lot of land, if you had some great crops, if you had some great animals on your farm, they were usually killed. You would have your water poison. I told you about that. Your lakes, your land will be taken through hooks and crooks and murder. And your kids were dispersed to California, Chicago, Montana, and other places to get out of town so they won't be killed. Many times the black people in America, some of the Hispanics, some of the colored Hispanics, and some of the darker so-called Native Americans were told you got to get out of Dodge in 24 hours. Just like a refugee being bombed, you'd leave what you can put on your back in 10 minutes. They did to Japanese the same way on the West Coast in America during World War II. They told many of those Japanese, you got 12 hours to pack your stuff and meet me at the train station.
How did the Japanese get over here?
Well, they came over by invitation.
By invitation?
Yeah, the federal government had a lot of jobs with Japanese and Chinese and Indians and others because they were working the black folks like a dog, but they were expanding so fast, they didn't want to give black people the freedom they need to move into where they wanted. They didn't want to pay them anything, and they didn't want them to integrate with the so-called Maine Americans. So they bought a buffer group, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Italians, the dark Italians, the Polish, and many others that they treated as non-Europeans at the time and put them as the buffer to keep the black folks from moving up and taking over economically, socially, and politically in areas where the white folks wanted to keep their control.
So now, this is serious stuff.
Of course it is.
This is not trivial. This is serious stuff. This is somebody that's thinking and creating plans and methodologies designed to maintain power and control and economically superior. These are serious issues. Sometimes I'll have to remind our viewers out there that over 700,000 people died in the Civil War. 700,000 people lost their lives. And what were they fighting for? What was the war all about, Doc?
Well, the average person on the northern side didn't know what it was about. They knew what they were told. They were told, if you are Caucasian, if you are poor, we have a job for you, and you're going to have to join the Union Army or the Confederate Army. They don't explain exactly what's really going down. I was put in that same situation when I had to go to Vietnam. I was told that I was over there to fight for democracy. I believed that for the first 3 months. Then I found that there was no democracy in Vietnam. None whatsoever. They had dictators in the north and American-sponsored dictators in the south that were getting millions of dollars every month, all kinds of airplanes, munitions, Coca-Colas, television sets. Who needs a lot of Coca-Colas and television sets in a war zone? The big industrial complex specialists were shipping all that to the American soldiers, making millions of dollars, taxpayers' dollars. And when they get those items on the military base, A lot of times the enemy would come in and bomb them, shoot those mortars in on them, and blow them up. The next week or two, you'll see another 100,000 cases of Coca-Cola over there on the bank by the fence of a military base. They were getting rich, and we had to defend that kind of stuff. And still, we left there as cowards. We didn't win the war. We didn't win World War II. We didn't win World War I. Didn't win nowhere. And I done told you before, the only war Americans won was the war with Mexico in 1812.
Wow.
A lot of people don't like to hear that. We just stopped. And they're going to do the same thing with the Russians and the Ukrainians.
Is that Daniel Boone and David Crockett?
Oh, that's propaganda. Hell, that's propaganda.
You don't believe in the battle at the Alamo?
Oh, I believe they had a battle now. But you didn't find David Crockett and Daniel Boone and all them boys being what we call good Americans, to the point where they wanted to have freedom. They wanted to be one way. They wanted to take the country. They wanted to take Texas away from Mexico.
Yeah.
And they gave their lives for that.
For that. It's serious business. And see, our folk don't take nothing serious. We are sheep. We do not think that there's anything worth fighting for.
That's right, we don't. Other than going to heaven.
Other than going to heaven.
That's right.
We don't find any other values out there that you say we ought to, as a race, defend and die for. We don't find that.
If you find something to defend and die for as a collective unit, you usually don't have to die for it. Because if you find something that you are so concerned about and use a collective mentality, the human enemies of mankind will forget about you and leave you alone. And then you can start building your community.
I gotta hear it again. If you find something that you're willing to defend and die for,
your enemy will leave you alone.
And you usually don't have to die.
You don't. You just have to fight like you want to die. And you have to let the enemy know, this is my last stand. You're not going to come in here and disrupt what I'm doing, because I'm going to do unto you as you do unto. T-O colon. And then you add the other to it.
That's right. Now, Doc, let me ask you this, because we're getting to the end of our program. So, from a strategic standpoint, black folk are in a position. We are on a plantation. Now, it's a different looking plantation, but we all grouped together inside of 220s and 675s and all of the surrounding highways that become the invisible fence for black folk to stay inside of that area.
Not only in America, sir, all over the world. You go to Africa, you find the Africans. 90% of the population all basically living together, except those 2 or 3 Uncle Toms that's getting all that money as the president of the country, as members of parliament. A few of those might be living in mansions and colonies where they have their own personal bodyguards, because they are paid so much money to keep the Europeans, the French and the British and the others in power. They can afford to do that. But the other 99% are living in the worst part of Africa, in the worst part of Asia, in the worst part of India. And if you look at it, it's usually the man of color anywhere you go in the world that's in the worst predicament, even though he outnumbers the others 10 to 1. And every time a black person anywhere in the world rise up and say, I want freedom, they are usually killed or compromised.
Now, Doc, there are some that say that black folks have to invade the enemy's camp, meaning that black folks who are all inside of this imaginary fence, all of them are Democrats, etc. Some say that black folk ought to invade the Republican Party.
They should. They should. They should invade any party that's taking advantage of them. It is like putting.
No, wait. We should invade and become a part of the party that's taking advantage of me.
Of course.
Now,
And
explain.
And get in some of those positions of responsibility.
Well, the rest of the community is going to say that you deserted the community and that you are a traitor and you're not going to be looked upon.
Well, that's why you have to forget about that, because you know you're not. You're getting in a position where you can have some power to help those dissenters that are talking about you and trying to keep you from doing what's best for yourself, your family, and your community, and including them. That's what they're supposed to do. They've been taught that way.
Wow.
They've been taught to take that whipping, turn over on your back, let them whip you on your back, let them whip you with miseducation, let them whip you with bribes when they put their people in office that alleged to be your kind.
Wow.
And just criticize them, not organize against them, criticize them. And that's make them happy, man.
So a leader is a tough-skinned person that doesn't care what others say or think about them. They are doing what they believe is the right thing to advance the very people that are talking about them.
That's right. That is a fact. And that's the hardest job to have, because some of the people are so timid. They've been whipped down so long and so often, even their mothers, their fathers, their grandfathers, and they remember all that punishment that they had to go through when they talked to their folks. But they not going to tell them much. My folks didn't. My grandfather didn't tell me much of anything about his life on the plantation. But I'm telling you, those kind of people just remain silent and tell you, son, and I used to hear this all the time, grandson, you just do the best you can. It's tough out there, but do the best you can. What should I do? Do the best you can, son. Things gonna change. And I tried to do the best I could.
And so in doing the best you can, sometimes we got to free ourselves of the shackles in our mind.
Exactly right.
And the conditions and the influence that our forefathers put upon us. See, every Sunday, Mama said, we're going to church. We're going to church on Wednesday night. And we got all that indoctrination. And so I believe that I could not do the kinds of things like gambling and like really taking on the capitalistic society, buy it for as little as you can and sell it for high as you can, and take what you want. Take what you want from the weak. I couldn't learn those lessons because of the indoctrination.
That's exactly right, and it was designed. You mentioned something that people don't even like to talk about. In my community, those black men that were dominant, that didn't enjoy that plantation life, went somewhere and bought them a few acres of land. They made and sold whiskey. They were engaged in stealing and go to the plantation and kill cows and hogs and sell them to the people. They go to the fields at night and get all that cotton that they could get and tote it on their backs 2 or 3 miles to take it somewhere and put it on a wagon and take it to the gin that was owned by the plantation owner and sell it and put all that money in their pocket. Mm-hmm. And on and on and on. And their kids finished college. Many of them went to so-called out-of-state universities, got law degrees, medical degrees, and some of those black men and women are alive today.
Wow.
And their dads and mothers and uncles and cousins were local criminals. Wow. That made all the whiskey, that did all kinds of things, engaged with houses of prostitution. I used to work in one of them when I was a kid.
Wow.
But I didn't know what I was doing. That's where I was getting that $1 an hour as a high school student.
Wow.
Man, that was a big time job then to make $1 an hour on weekends.
Yeah.
I knew I was rich.
Yeah, it was a big time job. Now we're coming to the end of our program. As always, we don't have enough time, but we have others that are coming on. But I'll just say to your point, I recall that old man Joe Kennedy running whiskey and raising presidents.
That's right. That's what you have to do. Black folks were doing it too.
And no conflict in that.
Even the people that hated him won because he would fund their campaigns. He would fund the Catholic bishops and priests. He would give the Catholic cardinal $2 or $3 million to upgrade his facility.
We're
on and on and on, and he was looked at as one with respect.
With respect.
In the community.
We're going to deal with the Catholic priests and the Pope and the influence and the power that they have on a future show. But we're running out of time. Doc, say your parting comments to our viewers out there before we get out of here.
Okay, well, it's clear, Mr. Socrates. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear the real non-radio, non-television version of how you can change your life, your status, your family, and your community in 30, 60, 90 days, you ought to call us, and we will come and talk to you and tell you the non-radio television version, how you can start changing your life and your status in 30, 60, 90 days. I've been telling Mr. Socrates and others, you don't reveal everything about your salvation plan on radio, in the public media, or anywhere. But there are certain things you can teach people on a small-time basis, in small numbers, and that information will be dispersed to groups, and then to nations, and then throughout the world, and things are changed during your lifetime. But if you just stay around and have faith and just pray and don't do anything else, 300 years from now, you'll be worse educationally, politically, economically than you are today. And some of you Negroes out there and so-called colored folks think you all are doing pretty good. In 7 years, all of you all that think you're doing well in those areas that I mentioned, you're going to find you're going to be locked into the urban ghetto. They used to call them relocation camps. Some leaders call them concentration camps. Some call them reservations. And we can teach you how to get away from that concept. And all you got to do is call us, 601-201-1957, and give us a chance to speak to you. We'd be glad to do that. Mr. Socrates and some of the other speaking team members will come to you and we'll help you change. Are you still willing to do that, Mr. Socrates?
I'm absolutely willing. I will follow you into battle anytime, anywhere, Doc.
Thank you, sir.
That's all for us this evening. We've enjoyed coming into your lives and to your homes in a way that hopefully was meaningful, that will give you some information that you won't find anywhere else. Stay tuned for the shows that are coming on after us here at We Believe Digital. Remember, go to YouTube and subscribe. Go to Facebook and send stars. Until next time, we want you to stay safe and good evening.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all